An exonym, a xenonym, is an external name for a geographical place, group of people, or language, dialect. A common name used only outside the place, group, or linguistic community in question, usually for historical reasons. An endonym or autonym, on the other hand, from the Greek root words nu delta omicron news, ендон, within, or alpha tau omicron, auto, self, and nu omicron mu alpha, όνoma, name, is given by members of a particular ethnolinguistic group to the group itself, its language, a dialect, or its homeland, or a specific place within it. Exonyms xenonym are derived from the Greek suffix όνoma nu omicron mu alpha and the prefixes chi omega chi epsilon nu omicron sigma exo and xia q10os respectively. Marcel Aurousseau, an Australian geographer, first used the term exonym in his work The Rendering of Geographical Names. Endonym was devised subsequently as a direct antonym of exonym. Definitions. Exonyms and endonyms can be names of places, ethnic groups, languages, or individuals. As pertains to geographical features, the United Nations Group of Experts on Geographical Names defines endonym, name of a geographical feature in an official or well-established language occurring in that area where the feature is located. Exonym, name used in a specific language for a geographical feature situated outside the area where that language is spoken, and differing in its form from the name used in an official or well-established language of that area where the geographical feature is located. For example, China, Egypt, and Germany are the English language exonyms corresponding to the endonyms Zhongguo, Masr, and Deutschland, respectively. Japanese, German, and Arabic are exonyms in English for the languages that are endonymously known as Nihongo, Deutsch, and Al Arabia, respectively. Exonyms may derive from different roots, as in the case of Germany for Deutschland. They may be cognate words which have diverged in pronunciation or orthography, or they may be fully or partially translated from the native language. For example, London is known by the cognate eponymous Londres in Catalan, Filipino, French, Galician, Portuguese, and Spanish, Londino in Greek, London in Dutch, Londra in Italian, Maltese, Romanian and Turkish, Lundra in Albanian, London in Czech and Slovak, London in Polish, Londonia in Icelandic, Lontu in Finnish, Lundun in Mandarin, London in Kurdish, and Luan Thon in Vietnamese. An example of a translated exonym is the name Soviet Union. Exonyms can also be divided into native and borrowed, i.e., from a third language. For example, Slovene uses the native exonyms Dunaj and Beneti, and the borrowed exonyms Kiev and Vilna, from Russian and Polish, respectively. A substantial proportion of English exonyms for places in continental Europe are borrowed from French. For example, Navarre, Belgrade, Cologne, Munich, Prague, Rome, Naples, Florence, Copenhagen, etc. Tendencies in the development of exonyms. According to James A. Matissoff, who introduced the term autonym into linguistics, human nature being what it is, exonyms are liable to be pejorative rather than complimentary, especially where there is a real or fancied difference in cultural level between the in-group and the out-group. For examples, Matissoff notes Kang, an opprobrious term indicating mixed-race parentage, is the Palong name for Jingpo people and the Jingpo name for Chin people. Both the Jingpo and Burmese use the Chinese word Jiaran, savage, rustic people, as the name for Lisu people. Exonyms develop for places of significance for speakers of the language of the exonym. Consequently, most European capitals have English exonyms, e.g., Athens, Belgrade, Bucharest, Brussels, Copenhagen, Lisbon, Moscow, Nicosia, Paris, Prague, Pristina, Rome, Vienna and Warsaw, while for instance historically less prominent capitals Ljubljana and Zagreb do not. Madrid, Berlin, Stockholm and Amsterdam, with identical names in most major European languages, are exceptions. For places considered to be of lesser significance, attempts to reproduce local names have been made in English since the time of the Crusades. Livorno, to take an instance, was Leghorn because it was an Italian port essential to English merchants and, by the 18th century, to the British Navy. Not far away, Rapallo, a minor port on the same sea, never received an exonym. In earlier times, the name of the first tribe or village encountered became the exonym for the whole people beyond. Thus the Romans used the tribal names Graecus and Germanus. The Russians used the village name of Chechen. Medieval Europeans took the tribal name Tatar as emblematic for the whole Mongolic Confederation, and the Magyar invaders were equated with the 500 years earlier Hunnish invaders in the same territory, and were called Hungarians. The Germanic invaders of the Roman Empire applied the word Goala to foreigners they encountered, and this evolved in West Germanic languages as a generic name for all non-Germanic speakers. Thence, the names Wallachia, Vlachs, Wallonia, Walloons, Cornwall, Wales, Wallasey, Welsh in Alsace, and even the Polish name for Italy, Włochy. Usage. During the late 20th century, the use of exonyms often became controversial. Groups often prefer that outsiders avoid exonyms where they have come to be used in a pejorative way. For example, Romani people often prefer the term to exonyms such as gypsy, and the French term bohemian, bohème. People may also avoid exonyms for reasons of historical sensitivity, as in the case of German names for Polish and Czech places which used to be ethnically or politically German, and Russian names for locations once under Russian control. In recent years, geographers have sought to reduce the use of exonyms to avoid this kind of problem. For example, it is now common for Spanish speakers to refer to the Turkish capital as Ankara rather than use the Spanish exonym Angora. According to the United Nations Statistics Division, time has, however, shown that initial ambitious attempts to rapidly decrease the number of exonyms were over-optimistic and not possible to realize in the intended way. The reason would appear to be that many exonyms have become common words in a language and can be seen as part of the language's cultural heritage. In some situations, the use of exonyms can be preferred. For instance, for multilingual cities such as Brussels, which is known for its linguistic tensions between Dutch and French speakers, a neutral name may be preferred so as to not offend anyone. Thus, an exonym such as Brussels in English could be used instead of favoring either one of the local names. Other difficulties with endonyms have to do with pronunciation, spelling and word category. The endonym may include sounds and spellings which are highly unfamiliar to speakers of other languages, making appropriate usage difficult if not impossible for an outsider. Over the years, the endonym may have undergone phonetic changes, either in the original language or the borrowing language, thus changing an endonym into an exonym, as in the case of Paris, where the S was formerly pronounced in French. Another example is the endonym for the German city of Cologne, where the Latin original of Colonia has evolved into Köln in German, while the Italian and Spanish exonym Colonia closely reflects the Latin original. In some cases, no standardized spelling is available either because the language itself is unwritten or because there are competing non-standard spellings. use of a misspelled endonym is perhaps more problematic than the respectful use of an existing exonym. Finally, an endonym may be a plural noun and may not naturally extend itself to adjectival usage in another language, like English, which has a propensity to use the adjectives for describing culture and language. The attempt to use the endonym thus has a bizarre-sounding result. The name for a language and a people are often different terms, of course, which is a complication for an outsider, as modern technology removes many of the barriers between peoples. It is increasingly becoming the case that younger people may be more familiar with an endonym than with its official exonym. For example, many Italian cities are now more famous for the football teams, and Torino and Napoli are becoming more common than Turin and Naples. Sometimes the government of a country tries to endorse the use of an endonym instead of traditional exonyms outside the country. In 1935, Reza Shah requested that foreign nations use the name Iran rather than Persia in official correspondence. The name of the country had internally been Iran since the time of the Sassanid Empire, whereas the name Persia is descended from Greek Persis, referring to a single province which is officially known as Fars Province. In 1949, the government of Siam changed the name to Thailand, although the former name's adjective in English was retained as the name for the fish, cat and twins. In 1972, the government of Ceylon changed the name to Sri Lanka, although the name Ceylon was retained as the brand name for tea. In 1985, the government of Côte d'Ivoire requested that the country's French name be used in all languages instead of exonyms such as Ivory Coast, so that Côte d'Ivoire is now the official English name of that country in the United Nations and the International Olympic Committee. In most non-francophone countries, however, the French version has not entered common parlance. In 1989, the government of Burma requested that the English name of the country be Myanmar, with Myanmar as the adjective of the country and Bama as the name of the inhabitants. The Ukrainian government maintains that the capital of Ukraine should be spelled Kyiv in English because the traditional English exonym Kiev was derived from the Russian name Kiev. The Belarusian government argues that the endonym Belarus should be used in all languages and has been rather successful in English, where the former exonym Bielorussia, still used with reference to the Soviet Republic, has virtually died out, whereas in other languages exonyms like Danish Vidisland, Dutch Wit-Rusland, Estonian Valjavin, Faroese Vatarusland, Finnish Valko-Venäjä, German Weißrussland, Greek Lefkarosia, Hungarian Fejeroros or Sorg, Icelandic Hvita Rusland, Swedish Vitrisland, Turkish Beyaz Russia, Chinese or French Bielorussi, Italian Bielorussia, and Spanish Bielorussia are still much more common than Belarus. In 2006, the South Korean national government officially changed the Chinese name of its capital, Seoul, from the exonym Hanchang to Shua. This use has now been made official within the People's Republic of China. Following the declaration in 1979 of Han pinyin spelling as the standard romanization of Chinese, many Chinese endonyms have successfully replaced English exonyms, especially city and most province names in mainland China, e.g. Beijing, Guangdong, Qingdao, although older English exonyms are sometimes used in certain contexts, e.g. Peking, Canton, etc. In the case of Beijing, the adoption of the exonym by media outlets quickly gave rise to a hyper-foreignized pronunciation, with the result that it is more common today to hear native speakers of American English actualize the J in Beijing as the official romanized name of New Taipei, which is the largest city of Taiwan, includes a totally English word new added to Taipei. When the city was promoted from former Taipei County in 2010, Exonyms as pejoratives. Matisov wrote, a group's autonym is often egocentric, equating the name of the people with mankind in general, or the name of the language with human speech. For example, various Native American autonyms are sometimes explained to English readers as having literal translations of original people or normal people, with implicit contrast to other First Nations as not original and not normal. Exonyms often describe others as foreign-speaking, non-speaking, or nonsense-speaking. The classic example is the Slavic term for the Germans, Nemci, possibly deriving from a plural of nemi. Standard etymology has it that the Slavic peoples referred to the Germanic neighbors as mutes because their language was unintelligible. The term survives to this day in the Russian Nemci, Bulgarian Nemci, Ukrainian Nemci, Polish Nemci, Czech Nemki, Slovak, Slovenian and Serbo-Croatian Nijeci, Nemki, Montenegrin and Jmci, as well as in the Hungarian Nemet and Romanian Nemti, and even in the Turkish Nemce and Arabic al-Nimsa. One of the more prominent theories regarding the origin of the term Slav suggests that it comes from the Slavic root slavo, meaning word or speech. Quote, in this context, the Slavs are describing Germanic people as mutes, in contrast to themselves, the speaking ones. Another example of such development is the exonym su, an abbreviated form of naduasu, derived most likely from a Proto-Algonquin term, *ito, foreign-speaking. 2 millennia earlier, the Greeks thought that all non-Greeks were uncultured and so called them barbarians, which eventually gave rise to the exonym Berber, while the Irish words for England and its people are Sasana and Sasanic. The word for the English language is beacutarla, which derives ultimately from a word meaning lips. In Old Irish, this word was applied to any foreign language, but by the medieval period it had come to be used exclusively for the English language. Confusion with renaming. Exonyms and endonyms must not be confused with the results of geographical renaming, as in the case of St. Petersburg, which became Petrograd in 1914, Leningrad in 1924, and St. Petersburg again in 1991. In this case, although St. Petersburg has a German etymology, it was never a German exonym for the city between 1914 and 1991, just as Nieuw Amsterdam, the Dutch name of New York City until 1664, is not its Dutch exonym. Old place names that have become outdated after renaming may afterwards still be used as historicisms. For example, even today one would talk about the Siege of Leningrad, not the Siege of St. Petersburg, because at the time the city was called Leningrad. Likewise, one would say that Immanuel Kant was born in Königsberg in 1724, not in Kaliningrad, as it has been called since 1946. Sometimes, however, historical names are deliberately not used because of nationalist tendencies to linguistically lay claim to a city's past. As a case in point, the Slovak Wikipedia article on the 1805 Peace of Pressburg does not use any of the city's names then in use, but today's name Bratislava, which became the city's name only in 1919. The name Madras, now Chennai, may be a special case. When the city was first settled by Englishmen in the early 17th century, both names were in use. Possibly they referred to different villages which were fused into the new settlement. In any case, Madras became the exonym, while more recently, Chennai became the endonym. Likewise, Istanbul is still called Constantinople in Greek, despite the name having been changed in Turkish between 1923 and 1930. Even Constantinople was not its original name, as it had been the Greek city of Byzantium, named after its mythical founder, Byzas. In the Ottoman Empire, another name for Istanbul was Asitane, which in Turkish means capital city. Today, the capital city of Kazakhstan is Astana.